Welcome to the Intentional Health for Women podcast. I'm your host, Garrett GQ Query. This podcast is dedicated to developing intentional health for women. Former 400-pound fat man turned health and fitness professional, specializing in women's health. In this podcast, you will find over a decade of experience in the health and fitness industry, serving women to become their most intentional self through strength training, nutrition, and lifestyle practices. Each week, we will dive into a variety of different topics, ranging from interviews with women leading the way in the health and fitness industry, client case studies throughout the years, myth busting, social media trends, female hormones, gut health, and so much more. We are not normal. We are intentional. Welcome to another episode of the Intentional Health for Women podcast. I'm your host, Garrett GQ Query. Today, I'm joined by Paige. Paige, welcome.
Hi, thank you for having me.
Yeah, absolutely. So Paige, you just moved to Arizona not too long ago.
No, actually, I've been here my whole life.
Your whole life?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, I read that wrong.
Yeah.
Where I read something about moving.
Moving. I did move into a new place.
Okay.
As of recently.
Maybe that was.
But no, I've actually grown up in Arizona, born and raised here.
Born and raised. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
What part of the valley?
North Phoenix. So I grew up in Moon Valley area, if you've heard of it.
Yep.
That's where I grew up.
Yeah. So when I first moved here, I was on Deer Valley and
okay.
right there, 17101.
Oh yeah. That's right where I grew up.
Pretty familiar with the area.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Got you. Tell me, so you say you suffered with an eating disorder, right? And that was a huge low point. What led into that? Where does that journey begin? How did we even find that?
So it's interesting because as I was coming here, I was thinking about it and I was like, there's so many layers to this. You could go back to when I was a kid if you really wanted to think about it. Mm-hmm. Essentially, I have been a coach since I was 17. I was shadowing under my trainer, fell in love with fitness. I just wanted to be a coach while I went to school to be a physical therapist or a physician's assistant. Working at the gym, I never felt good about myself. I always kind of felt like I didn't look the part as a coach. And I remember working at that gym and seeing these competitors come in, bodybuilders. And these women looked great. Mm-hmm. And I was like, I want that. They seem so confident. They seem so strong. And I, upon reflection, had a poor relationship with food at that time. But I didn't realize until after I had competed. I've actually been a bodybuilder for 5 years now. Mm-hmm. And it didn't really manifest itself fully because it was normal in college to binge drink, to get a ton of Taco Bell after, to maybe starve yourself because that was what was seen. I didn't think anything of it.
Yeah.
And then I decided to hire a coach because I wanted to compete. I wanted to feel like the way those women felt. Mm-hmm. And I competed. It was the coolest freaking thing on planet Earth to see my body change for the first time for real. I had always lifted. I was always an athlete, loved to work out. But the second that I was put on a meal plan and I stuck to it, my body changed. And I was like, this is so cool. This is that missing piece. I got down to, keep in mind, I didn't have a lot of muscle at the time, but 98 pounds.
And how tall are you?
I am 5'1" on a good day.
Yeah.
Still very little. I never thought I'd be less than 100 pounds. That was crazy to me. And I competed in bikini. Mm-hmm. I did it twice. I did 2 shows back to back. So I think they were 2-3 weeks apart.
Okay.
And the coach that I had put me on a meal plan and it was tilapia, which I don't ever want to touch again now that I think about it, and asparagus or cucumbers. So I didn't understand.
You don't want to eat that again?
I'll still eat the vegetables. The tilapia, I'm good. I would eat it cold and it really, honestly, it tasted good at that time because I was starving.
Yeah.
And I really struggled towards the end of that prep, but being as determined as I was, I ignored it. So I was standing up and passing out. I was doing 3 hours of cardio daily. It got to the extreme. I actually went back and plugged in the macros just to see what I was at. And it was like 600 calories for over 4 weeks that I was consuming. So it makes sense, right? Mm-hmm. Post show, I didn't know what a reverse diet was.
No.
Never heard of it.
Yeah.
And so I ended up binging every night because I couldn't, like, my body physiologically needed food. And in my head, I was embarrassed and didn't want anyone to know because I went from 98 pounds to 140 pounds in like less than 6 weeks. Like, it was absolutely awful. And I didn't want anyone to know because for the first time in my life at this 98-pound stage, I got praise. I got attention. I got affirmation that I was working hard. I've always been a hard worker, but I always felt overlooked. And then when I competed, I got that. And then it was like post-show and I didn't know what to do. I lost it. And I was like absolutely devastated. I didn't understand fully. And I don't think I had the emotional maturity to like figure out this was like deeper than just like the food, obviously. And so I just kept trying to do what I did before. So back on that meal plan, back on that cardio. And I was also a sophomore in college. And I lived with 4 girls. So we were in a sorority. We were all going out partying. So somehow I was trying to balance that and trying to lose all the weight I gained. And it didn't work until I discovered, and this is actually something I spoke at an event for women's wellness about my journey. And I had shared this and I had my assistant coach come with me. And I guess I had never told anyone this, which is crazy. Because like my mom knows now. I told her I discovered my mom's Adderall. And so I was stealing that to suppress my appetite. And then I would attempt to purge, couldn't do it. Thank God that I was not able to actually like make that happen for myself. But I remember blowing every blood vessel up under my eyeballs and in my eyes, trying to undo the damage I thought I did. And that was like my absolute rock bottom. Like that's where I was like so uncomfortable in my body and it didn't feel like I was myself. I didn't feel like my inside matched my outside. And I just overall felt so like lost and confused. And of course it stemmed from food, but there was a lot more going on there that I didn't address. And that's when I got like really stubborn with myself. I was like, I don't want to sit like this anymore. And so I did what any sane person would do. And I prepped again. And I competed again. And it worked. I lost the weight. But I soon quickly discovered that it felt like I could only lose the weight if I was in a prep.
Yeah.
Or maintain weight loss if I was in a prep or if I was in a meal plan. And that's where like I got a lot lower. That was right around the time that COVID hit. So the world shut down. The show I was prepping for, gone. And I had been killing myself for like 18 weeks. And I'd say that was my like, okay, I got to figure out what I'm doing. And from there, I figured it out. It took a few years of falling on my face. And I still think I learned to this day, but it was really cool to see that change.
Yeah, absolutely. It's, sometimes we have to learn the hard way, right? I think that's holds true for a lot of people is the only way they can lose weight is with a intrinsic motivator, right? Whether it be in our world, bodybuilding, or for general population, it being a vacation,
spring break, their wedding, certain other events. That
can really like hold the thing, right? Like that can toe the line, because like you said, essentially at a point in your life, the only way you could lose weight was on a meal plan.
Yeah.
And
with a date in mind. with something.
Meal plan, date in mind. I can't eat that because it's not on my meal plan and we haven't hit goal date.
Yeah. But then you get to the goal date and then it's now what? And you need that next shiny object. You need that next thing to work towards. But what do you do when your body says no? Your body's done. And that's like where I kind of hit a point. And it's funny because I try to take my pain and suffering to teach my clients because unfortunately I see it often, it's very similar things. So I've been able to help prevent that. But, there is a certain point where your body will fight back physiologically.
Yeah, 100%. Mentally. So talk about that. What did you, because everybody, if that's one thing that I've learned about being in this industry for a decade, and was actually talking about some of this stuff on my stories the past couple of days, that's really quite interesting. A case that I'm currently working on is everyone's physiology is different. Mm-hmm. And everybody's physiology breaks in a different way. So for you, what was the first thing that happened for you?
So it's always felt like this, but I've always had to fight really hard to lose weight. It takes a lot of effort. Now I put on muscle very easily. But it got to the point where I was not budging. I could be on that 600 calorie diet, those 3 hours of cardio, my weight would be jumping up. I would be, violently dizzy at all hours of the day. I'd wake up covered in sweat at night. I couldn't sleep, but I was tired. And I of course got blood work. So my cortisol was high. My thyroid was downregulated. My sex hormones non-existent. The whole thing, which we knew. And then post show, after I had competed, it was even some things that some people that have extreme diet experience, I never felt full. I could eat and eat and eat because my body was I didn't have any hunger cues. I was always food focused. Mm-hmm. My digestion definitely got messed up, not having only eaten such little food and specific foods. And my skin was unhappy with itself. And my cortisol was obviously a fight and a half to bring down naturally. But those were the biggest things that I saw.
Yeah, absolutely. How long? So I'm guessing in that time frame of the handful of shows that you did, including killing yourself for 18 weeks, leading into the show that never happened.
I stayed in a prep and I competed in one. I was in prep for 10 months. I competed in North Americans then in, September, I think it was, or maybe it was August. Maybe
even it got pushed back.
Yeah, it got pushed back a few times. It was actually in a tent and there was no audience. That was cool. First national show ever. Yeah. So I stayed. I just stayed in the prep and I worked out from home. I made a home gym and I ran at the park. I bought a treadmill. I was not going to quit. So at that time, it didn't matter. I was going to stay on that meal plan. It actually was probably really good for me because I had nothing to do but work out, yes. But I also started to get curious. I was like, there's got to be a different way to do this. I don't want to live like this. I don't want to be on a meal plan forever. So I started research and become really obsessed with the nutrition aspect. Yeah. So I could learn it myself. I even changed my major at that time to be nutrition. So I started taking nutrition courses. So all while I'm learning all this, I'm still doing the strict dieting and I'm learning all the tools that you should be for longevity. And I was like, okay. After my show, I was like, okay, something has to change. Right. And that's when I finished competing and I fell right back in to that binge and restrict cycle. And it was arguably worse. And I was dreading it the whole time. And I was like, okay, you got to swallow your pride. Ask somebody for help. You have to ask for help. So then I hired a different coach and I was completely brutally honest, told him what was going on. And he came up with a plan and he taught me and introduced me to macros. Yeah. And I was my world exploded. I was like, I can still have peanut butter. You're kidding. Or chocolate. And like, I was like, obviously maybe a little too excited about if it fits your macros versus like health. But it was like the stepping stone to understanding, hey, I don't need to view foods as like, hey, this is on the meal plan or it's not. This is good. This is bad. Yeah. And he helped me successfully for the most part. I mean, I've always, the first couple of reverses I took too far, no matter what, like the bulk. But he helped me successfully reverse for the first time. Yeah. So I was able to see, okay, my digestion got normal. My cortisol came down. My thyroid hormone got back. Mm-hmm. I had regular hunger cues and I wasn't, gaining like 40 pounds in 4 weeks. So that was really cool. And that's when I started to really take back control.
Did you ever have lab work?
Prior?
Yeah.
Weirdly enough, which I don't know why, but I got lab work done a couple times. I've always been pretty healthy. Mm-hmm. I think it must have just been something that like maybe my mom was curious about, because I had gotten it done like right before I competed the first time. And then, before I started the prep, preface that. And then I got it done after that first prep. I've gotten lab work done often. So it's been cool to watch those metrics and see something really interesting. This is kind of a side tangent, but I've always had high cortisol. Like even before I competed, my cortisol was always on that higher end. Mm-hmm. I competed in July of this year and my cortisol was relatively high from competing. I lost a lot of weight and was training hard, but just through food and practicing like actual like groundedness meditation, like prioritizing my mental health, mm-hmm. my cortisol came down to the lowest it has ever been, even before competing. And I thought that was really cool to see, okay, like food is medicine and like how you speak, how you think, how you act will impact how you feel, mm-hmm. and it'll show in blood work.
Define high.
Oh God. I think it was like 27. I'd have to go look at what
at the highest?
I think so. I'd have to look at what the measurement was. I think it was 27.
So I'm a huge blood chem nerd.
Yeah, you're talking about Sam Miller, so I figured.
It's my jam. Blood chemistry, like cortisol, generally take it with a grain of salt because it's an extremely volatile like marker, like in serum lab work.
Yeah.
Obviously, you have multiple data points over courses of years. So it's like, okay, we see a trend. Mm-hmm. All right, we can kind of start to, hey, it's probably pretty high. A lot.
Yeah. Well, also it correlated with how I felt.
Yeah.
So that's where I was like, okay.
But that's where like saliva or like urine analysis testing to map out
when it rises.
Map out like, hey, what is your actual pattern? Is it like, what does that look like? Can be beneficial. What else? There was something else that kind of, so, okay. You discover macros like, and you realize, okay, like, oh, I can like actually eat like a normal human being. Mm-hmm. What does that, you took it too far. Like, what is that kind of like initially, what does that look like?
So I will say I wasn't like a complete, like, eating Pop-Tarts for every single meal or donuts to hit my macros. But I definitely like the freedom was like, okay, I'm going to fit like this big, post-show cookies that they have. I'm fitting this into my macros. I'm looking up the macros for crumble. And like, it was because I loved sweets. Like, and it wasn't until probably like the past couple of years I was like, okay, now I care about my health too, not just the macros and keeping a certain body composition, that I started to understand like whole foods and I actually enjoy eating that way more than I do eating the processed foods, although I will have it here and there as I want. But it was like a stepping stone. So I think it's kind of like, you probably hear this a lot too. Someone like starts with a meal plan or a strict diet. They find flexible dieting. Maybe they're too flexible. So then they start figuring out and learning whole foods approach. And then from there, they can transition into intuitive eating or more basically just like understanding your body and how to fuel your body. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I mean, it's building a skill set.
Yeah.
Over the years, I've been fortunate enough to have clients, some of which I've coached for upwards of 6 years. And this client in specific, like I remember, like I've always used a flexible dieting approach, dabbled with some like meal plans throughout, but majority of the clientele that I've worked with, like just don't need a meal plan. And that's just not it's just not a great tool a lot of times, like for those people. And I remember I was like harping on this client for like months. Like I was like, cause I go through the journal every week. And I was like, hey, like just because this stuff fits in your macros, like in majority of it really wasn't like that bad. It wasn't like trying to continually fit crumble in or Oreos. It was like low carb tortillas, and because they wanted to eat the low carb tortillas so they could have this freedom later on in the day. Or it was the protein bars because, I don't have time to eat this protein source. This is easier. And I will never forget this, is like, it was within a month, like they finally were like, they accepted it, and they were like, okay, I'm going to listen. I'm going to like change these habits. I got like a book of like gratitude, because for the first time in their adult life, they actually had a normal menstrual cycle, that they weren't in crippling pain, anxiety, insanely heavy flow. Like they just had a normal menstrual cycle. And they were like, I thought I was broken. I thought that I was just not one of those women fortunate enough to experience this. And it was like, they didn't even know it was coming. Like it came out of like surprise. And they were like, wait, what? How? And all because it was like majority of whole nutrient dense foods. And I think that's a huge thing that a lot of women don't really realize, is how sensitive the female body is.
100%.
To nutrients, and how crucial it is for you to, majority of the time, eat whole nutrient dense real foods.
Yeah.
Like, is it okay from time to time to have a little bit of crumble or to have some chips or whatever? Absolutely. But if you're living a life that's like less than ideal, or like you don't feel great, or you have like these massive like ebbs and flows during your cycle, it's common, and probably a majority of your girlfriends are saying, yeah, I deal with that too, but it doesn't mean it's normal.
No. And it's cool too, because like I coach a lot of women that will get their cycles back regularly. I've had quite a few get pregnant. Like they've been trying, and then they start eating healthy, and it happens. Or we have a lot of like, lots of PCOS, or lots of really irritated guts. Second, you bring in mostly whole nutrient dense foods. You take away the diet foods. I'm not a huge diet food person. No. Sara Lee bread, the low carb tortillas, the brownie, like I don't have the real brownie. If anything, that's going to be better for you than whatever's in it. And I remember I had a client that I said, listen, you don't need to, it was actually low carb tortillas. Those are maybe my nemesis at this point. Cause I'm like, I have I have a lot of problems going to the bathroom. I'm like 8 low carb tortillas. I'm like, no wonder, like, let's take those out. I said, you can have the real tortilla, or you can have the real bread. And they were like, really? And I was like, yes. Like, I would actually rather have you have the sourdough bread than that 45 calorie slice of who knows what at this point.
Frankenfood.
Yeah. And it's so cool to teach that to women. 8
low carb tortillas. Like that has to be such an obscene amount of like
fiber.
Fake fiber.
Oh my gosh. Like no wonder you can't go to the bathroom.
Like I'd be willing to bet, like I bet you if you pulled that like in Chronometer, like
I don't want to know.
It's always really funny to me, like when I pull like Chronometer reports and I'll look at your fiber intake, and it'll be like, this person hit 250% of their fiber intake. And I'm like, what? And then you like go and like read their diary and like, oh my God, like this, but it's not real fiber.
Yeah. Yeah.
Speaking of which, like during this whole experience, right? Did you go through that process of losing your menstrual cycle?
Oh, every time.
Every time.
Yeah. I would get so lean. Like my body fat percentage was so low. I was so active. I was consuming such that female athlete triad, 100%. But I even suffered that in high school because I was a multi-sport athlete. So it was very common for me. What's been cool is through food, I've been able to get it back and stress control. Yeah. So I think that's a big thing for me. And obviously mitigating or changing how I trained. So post-show, the first 3 months post-show, my training was completely different. And I just had to take a complete step back. I actually took up jujitsu instead of weightlifting for a while for some form of movement that brought me into the present because I was so anxious at the gym thinking about, oh, I forgot to send that email. I forgot to reply to that check-in, like that kind of thing. So I picked up something different than I just in the past couple months have re-implemented weight training and everything like that.
Amazing. That's awesome. Good for you. So some of this is pretty recent.
I competed in, but I've been competing. And I will say after that first competition I did with the new coach that taught me macros, it's been better and better every time. Obviously, I will continually grow and continually improve, but I have a lot better handle on my own body and understanding what works for me and what doesn't, where I stopped competing in July of this year and I knew exactly what to do to get out of it and how to be healthy. I actually went fully intuitive 6 weeks post show, which I wouldn't recommend to most people. Like I wasn't tracking macros. I wasn't doing anything. I was just like, all right, we're good. And then I got my menstrual cycle back within 4 months of competing.
Nice. You said earlier the menstrual cycles. Oh boy. I'll move on from that one. Multiple sport athlete growing up.
Yeah.
What sports?
So I played softball. And then I mean, we can argue about this if you want, but I was a cheerleader. So I did competitive cheer. I've never cared. Like you can call it a sport, you cannot call it a sport. I was active. Yeah. So I was in season both. And then I actually did a little bit of swim for a while. Didn't really stick with it. But for the most part, I was always in full, like cheer was year round. And then in the spring season, I did softball as well. So I was doing both, going to 2 practices in a day.
Do you know what relative energy deficiency syndrome is?
I've heard the term before, but I'm not super familiar with it.
So it was actually discovered, I might butcher this and remember incorrectly, but I'm almost positive that it was like discovered in the 60s in the women's gymnastics team. So relative energy deficiency syndrome is basically your inputs, your food intake does not match your outputs. So for you were a prime candidate, especially being a multi-sport athlete in high school, losing your menstrual cycle. It's a very common piece of REDS. And it's such a fine line, like for you being the athlete that you are of like 5'1", small, petite human, you walk a very fine line, right? Like it's not uncommon for, like you covered it in a recent like social media post, like why 1,200 calorie diets don't work.
Yeah.
But it's actually not uncommon with a human as small as you that it actually does work, right? Like there's always context to every statement.
100%.
And like 1,200 calories for a 5'1" human being is actually a decent amount of food. Like I'm not saying that it's a guarantee. Like I've had 5'1" female athletes that smash 2,400 calories.
Oh, there's some.
They
but
exist.
For the most part, your general intake is lower.
Yeah.
Because you're smaller.
Yeah.
I will say 1,200 calories doesn't work for longevity.
No.
So, the people that just have the plan, like the amount of calls I get on with potential clients where they're like, Yeah, I just, I thought 1,200 calories was good. And so I've been trying to follow that, and maybe it worked, and then they fall off because they're hungry, or it's not sustainable, or, they're not 5'1" and their body needs more fuel. And what's really cool too is like through these reverse diets, I can get my maintenance levels back up.
Yeah.
So my maintenance now is 2,100 probably.
Nice.
And that took a lot of work.
Yeah.
Because realistically, like I'd say my maintenance window prior was 1,600 calories, maybe. Also, I built a lot of muscle, worked at that. But it's really interesting to see that fine line. Like there is some people that just can't, like it's so common. You'll see coaches like promote how much a client is eating, the calories. And like, yeah, that's cool, but that's not going to be every client. Like you will never see me with over 300 carbs. Won't happen. My body wouldn't be happy. There's times where I bulked, and I bulked a little too hard. And I will say I was uncomfortable because we were way over maintenance and way over what I needed for a surplus.
Uncomfortable how?
Gaining extra body fat that I wouldn't have liked. Like I just remember, obviously we're trying to grow for bikini division. And in particular, it was like my legs and glutes, which take a lot of work to grow.
Yeah.
And I just remember I was sweating my ass off at the gym, and it wasn't even hot. And I was like, okay, we're holding on to some extra body fat that like, I'm just warm, and pull-ups were so hard. And I was just like, this is not healthy weight for me to have at this point.
Yeah. I mean, I'm in the process of coming to the close of growing for like my first show. And so I've experienced like my first real surplus in my life, like intentional.
For real, yeah.
Day in and day out. Hey, we're hitting these targets. Yeah. And after like seeing like labs, as many like lab reports, like I've read upwards of like 1,500 labs in the last 15 months. A lot of that's actually pretty normal. Like not to discredit what you're saying, like the excess body fat, right? Like that's a very fine line and a surplus to walk.
Yeah, 100%.
But when you've truly spent a good amount of time in a surplus to grow, your insulin sensitivity is going to start to go to crap. You are going to be full. It like, especially because bodybuilding, right? Like it is an extreme.
This isn't normal. And I think that's where I was like, okay, I'm uncomfortable because this isn't normal. This isn't how I should necessarily, if I wasn't a bodybuilder, be behaving.
No, 100%. Like you're experiencing fullness all day, every day. Like I remember like when I first started like growing and like my nutrition, like I was sitting there almost every day, every last meal. I was like eating my meal and sweating.
Yeah.
Eating my meal and sweating. My body's like, dude, what are you doing?
Calm down, please.
So I resonate with that feeling.
Yeah.
Like I get it. It's just like that stuff is fun, but it's like it's to be expected, and it's like it's part of the sport. Like it's
something interesting too, though. Especially I think at least for myself or for the bikini division, it's not worth it to like. There's a point where you're just putting on body fat. And at that point, like you just have to lose that body fat, and is that worth it for the prep, or is it worth it to maybe enter a little bit of a maintenance or chill out for a second instead of pushing food? And that's where I kind of had to learn my lesson, where I maybe push food too high, put on too much body fat, where it was like I have to lose this for a prep, and I already struggle to lose body fat. Like I have to work really hard for that. So that was an interesting learning process for me.
The all in or all out like mentality, where do you feel that came from?
That's a really good question. It's funny because I work with a lot of women that are very similar, and what I've seen is a lot of it comes from being an athlete or being a high achiever. So I've always been the type where I've worked really hard for everything. I had 3 jobs in high school. And then while I built my business, I had 2 other jobs. Like I always needed more and to keep working. So I think it comes from, you need to be perfect. You need to achieve. And that's part of your identity.
Mm-hmm.
And when I was able to kind of lose that identity, then it was kind of like, oh, who am I at this point? And what does all or something look like? Not all or nothing. Or what does just like putting my best foot forward every day? And that's been a learning process. I will say I'm not perfect. Sometimes I'm still like, I wish I was perfect. Wish I could be all in or all out. But it's definitely a learning process for sure.
I mean, I think you're starting to experience probably, because how old are you?
25.
I think we go through a lot of identity shifts throughout life.
So much. And I think so recently, a huge identity shift I had is I got really into my faith. And I think that helped pull me out of that all or nothing mindset because I'm already forgiven.
Mm-hmm.
And so that was a really big thing for me. And that was like in this past year, that's what helped me get out of that. Okay, I need to be achieving. I need to be working. I need to be doing things to earn respect or, to get noticed or to be a good coach and just being who I am. I think that was a big, big part of that.
When I see people like behave in that way, and I'm sure you can resonate with this as a coach, is like this all or nothing, the go, go, go mindset. Like the thought always comes to mind because whether it's that or drugs or porn or what are you running from?
Oh, 100%. What are you masking? What feeling are you avoiding?
Mm-hmm.
It's funny because I actually got on a call and she let me share this with the clients in the group chat. So she's comfortable with me sharing, but like we straight up argued because she's like, I'm just an all or nothing person. I'm like, no, you're not. We don't have to be like this. And I was like, why is it? And we got down to like, what it was that she felt like she needed to say screw it if she was off course. And it was avoiding discomfort. It was avoiding not feeling good enough. And it was really cool to kind of see those light bulbs go off in her head, but also to see, I've seen that in myself. I've seen that in other people where it's like, oh, there is oftentimes it's almost like a form of self-sabotage. It is a form of self-sabotage being all or nothing.
100%. Yeah. It's a need for control where a lot of times things, you can't control them.
Mm-hmm.
Like you just can't. Like it is what it is.
Yeah.
Like it's funny you brought it up when I came in here. You said, "Oh, you played golf today." Like golf got to me today.
Really?
Like it got to me today, and like it's actually never happened. Like it's a hobby that I've picked up, and I just genuinely go play for the enjoyment of the game. And for the most part, I really don't keep score most of the time. And the first 3 holes today, crushed it. Like the best golf I've ever played. I was like, oh, I'm getting pretty good at this.
Yeah.
After that, complete and utter dumpster fire. Like the worst golf I've ever played.
Ooh.
Ever. Like worse than like my first time ever even on the course. And I was like, it got to be so bad. Like I was just not a great person to be around. Like my best friend was like, bro, get away from me with that. Do not bring that around me.
Interesting.
And I was like, yeah, that's fair. I think, yeah, it's just like, we develop like these like pain loops, right? In like behavior traits. And as we grow, as we evolve, as our identity shifts, like we start to recognize those pain loops and we make changes to shrink them. I don't think they'll ever go away.
They might be less out of your control, though. Like you're aware of them and you can stop and pattern interrupt yourself.
Yeah.
And I think that's like the biggest thing is like you have more control. It's not so much in your subconscious and you're not aware of it. So then you're like, oh, wait, hold on.
doing that thing again.
We're going to pause for a second. And like, I think that's the most that you can do and create a different behavior, not allow those thoughts and feelings to become that behavior again. Create a replacement for it.
And it doesn't mean that you won't trip and fall and full send right back into that pain loop.
Oh, 100%.
but then like, hey, like you said, pattern interrupt, recognize it, go back to the behaviors that you know serve the version that you are creating.
Yeah. Same thing goes with like messing up your diet.
Yeah.
Okay. You messed up. Are you going to try to make up for it the next day? Eat as little as possible, do extra cardio? Or are you going to get back to what you know works and what you can stay consistent with? Because you know that when you do that, you're just going to mess up again when you restrict yourself. And like, that's something that I used to do.
Oh, 100%.
Messed up on my diet. Try to make up for it. Did it work? No. Do I sometimes catch myself wanting to do that? No. Yeah, yes, absolutely. 100%.
Yeah.
Do I do it? No. So there's that pattern interrupt right there.
How bad did it get? Like, can you recall like an instance of like, oh, I messed up and like what you would do the following days?
Yeah. So, I mean, when I was like in the thick of it, so like when I had just come out of competing the first time, didn't really understand anything. I would do like eat like little to nothing all day. So it would be like cucumbers and celery. And I was at the time working as an in-person trainer. So I was moving my body a lot. I like talk with my hands most of the time. I'm demonstrating movements. I'm like out there and I'd lift too. So I was like probably on like 200 calories for the day, maybe have a protein shake or something.
Nice.
I'd come home from work, trainer's vice. So it was early morning till, 8, 9 p.m. at night, come home from work, starving, like couldn't think straight. I was so hungry and I don't remember what I would eat. Like that's how I knew it was bad because I couldn't recall what I ate, but I knew it was everything. And it would be to the point that I was uncomfortable and I felt sick. And a lot of times I wished I could throw up, but I just, for some reason, physiologically could not. But it was like to the point where like the only thing I could do was go to bed. Like I couldn't try to like fix what I felt like. But then the next day I'd be getting up, I'd be going to do cardio and I'd be not eating all over again. And then I'd come home. Same thing would happen. I might not even actually be hungry that day because of the 8,000 calories, 10,000 calories I probably consumed that night before.
Right.
But it became a habit and it became a routine. So then it was every single night. There was just this like uncomfortable binge and my stomach would hurt all day and I would be uncomfortable and I'd try to fix the damage and maybe it would work. Maybe I'd like skip that binge for one night and then it just happened all over again. I had a bad day. Something triggered me. I was weak. I was trying to escape emotional pain. And so therefore I turned right back to it.
That's a really great point. Like to dive deeper in is like, it's really common and not even to the extreme of what you just shared to get to that point. I grew up and by the age of 19, I was 400 pounds. That doesn't happen by accident, but it was a lesson that was taught to me was, happy, eat, sad, eat, angry, eat. Like any emotion we are eating. And so many people can relate to that, right? Like so many people can relate to feel emotion, eat food to cover up and avoid feeling the uncomfortable emotion. Which leads down a very just slippery slope.
I mean, there's a, pathway to drugs and alcohol there too. I've seen it a lot. It's really cool actually though. I have a lot of clients that have had previous drug or alcohol abuse issues. And when they come to me, they maybe struggle with food because they kick that habit and then they turn to food. And like, that's what they want to fix. And to see them take control of that is really cool too. But I've seen that happen in both directions. And I think it's just something to cover the initial uncomfortability that they're feeling, that I would be feeling, that you would be feeling, the emotion.
To avoid it. It's funny how we do it.
I know. And if we just sat with it, the thing is, I think it's really interesting, and I think about this a lot, is if we just sat with that emotion, what's going to happen? It's not going to kill us,
No.
But we think it will. And that's why we try to avoid it. Like, the world isn't going to end if we're sad for 30 minutes. Like, and we forget that because in our head, like, we can't distinguish the difference between that and survival. But what's the worst that happens? You're stressed out. You're sad.
So
yeah. I have a client, love her. She's like she's taught me a lot. Her favorite quote is, "Nobody's gonna die." Like, she'll be like, "I'm really stressed at work, but nobody's gonna die. It's not the end of the world." And I'm like, "You're so right." Like, nothing is that deep, you know. For the most part. Take that with a grain of salt, but for the most part, nothing is that bad. Nothing is that important. Nothing is important enough for you to sacrifice your own goals or desires or health to avoid the feeling. I think that's the biggest thing.
What's been one of your biggest strategies to instead of coping with food, to sit with it, sit with the emotion, sit with the discomfort? What's one of the biggest tools that you use?
So, as a coach, on like a big perspective, I have my clients kind of just check in with themselves. So before they eat a meal, I have them ground themselves and get like fully present. Like, what do you feel right now? What do your ears feel like? What do your eyes feel like? What is your, like, understand your body? Because sometimes overeating comes from ignoring a physiological need or a basic human need. Like, maybe you haven't drank enough water. Are your lips dry? Is your mouth dry? Do you need to drink some water? Do you need to go to the bathroom? Have you not sat down all day to rest? Like, just kind of like check in with yourself. I have my clients, I'm going to butcher this because I don't have it right in front of me, but it's like the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1 method. So you're going to sit down, take a deep breath, name 5 things you can see in the room, 4 things that you could touch, 3 things that you could smell, 2 things you could hear, and 1 thing you could taste. Just basically become fully in the present.
Yeah.
That has helped to kind of like at least check in with yourself before a meal. When it comes to like feeling the feelings, I think it depends on the individual and what they believe. But I think a big thing for me is my faith. So having prayer, having time with God has been like how I've allowed myself to feel and turn to something other than food or another self-destructive tendency. And I think that has been the biggest game changer for me in the past year.
What brought you back to God?
I've always, it's really interesting because I have always believed. I grew up in a Christian household, but we never went to church. My parents were forced growing up, so they didn't want to force us.
Yeah.
So I always had a belief, but I'd say this past year, I'm at that age now where there's a lot of life changes. Some people are having babies, getting married, and then some people I'm bailing out of jail, or or maybe both, all over the place, right?
Yeah.
And so going through a lot of life changes, I had a few, it's really interesting because I had a few heartbreaks, and it wasn't necessarily like in that romantic way. It was like heartbreaks with friends, heartbreaks with family members, we're at the point where I was just I actually talked to God. I was like, please don't break my heart again. I can't handle this. And then it was like, whoosh, everything. There was a point in time, probably about a year ago, that I felt like I had nothing. Everything that I cared about was completely gone. And from that point, I was like, well, got nothing else to turn to. So I just started reading my Bible, started listening to worship music. I was just like, I have nothing to lose. What's the point of everything if there isn't God? He obviously has a plan for me. I knew that. And I think that like gave me like little bits of hope. But it was really interesting because like there were a couple times where like I started to feel his love. And that's what I had desired in all these relationships that left me, whether it was friends, whether it was family, like who knows what. And that was like, I got a little bite of it, like a little taste of like feeling like real love. And I was like, oh, that's it. And then I became obsessed, just like I did with bodybuilding, just like I did with becoming a coach, like just with everything. And it has become such a big part of my life that like I see it in everything that I do at this point. It's really cool. It's really, really interesting.
It's powerful.
Mm-hmm.
It's yeah, I feel that. 2023 was similar. Like it stripped everything.
Yeah.
Not even like there was a big ending to a romantic relationship, but I lost a couple of friends that like genuinely thought would be like, hey, these people are going to be at my wedding. Hey, these people are like, they're going to be a part of my life for the rest of my life. Gone.
And as someone that values people so much, that was what rocked my world.
Yeah.
You know? And so I think that's where I had that identity shift. We were talking about going through lots of identity shifts. So I was like, oh, who am I if I'm not a good friend? If I'm not, you know, these titles that I gave myself with the people in my life. And that's where I had to adjust. And the only thing that I found safety in was God and was the word, which is really interesting. And I love it. I'll get better at talking about my testimony as I talk about it more. But it's been really cool to share that with my clients, with my family, with my friends.
What is that? How has that shifted? Like, okay, so a lot of loss, God. What does that look like has that changed how you approach friendships now?
Oh, 100%. You know, I had what I call as a shedding season where I'm very careful about who I surround myself with. You've actually interviewed two of my best friends, Katie and Courtney. And those are like God's gift. Like they are amazing human beings. And our friendship is built on a firm foundation. And that is our religion. I think it's also allowed me to see people as like, God loves them. Even if they're like the worst human being on planet Earth, they did me so dirty. God loves them and God forgave them. So I can forgive them because he forgave me, you know, and he loves me no matter what. I'm not a perfect human by any means. So it's actually allowed me to practice a lot of forgiveness, but it's also allowed me to be really careful about who I spend time with because it changes how I behave, how I think, how I feel, how I speak for the most part.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's a big one. I think that's a big important piece of like how faith can impact us. The ability to truly just like let go and be like, hey, I find myself a lot of times those people, like I'll pray for them for a while.
Oh, yeah.
Like, just like, hey, like, you know, thank you for this lesson. Thank you for your time and the memories and all those things, and genuinely wishing that person the best and hoping that, like, you know, you get what you were looking for in life, and in being able to move forward in that way. Of just like, hey, like, I'm good. I forgive you. What have you. Keep doing you.
And I think it's really cool because that's given me peace.
Yeah.
Like, instead of holding on to that resentment, holding on to that anger, holding on to that hurt, because the only thing that's doing, they probably don't care. They might not even know. Yeah. It's hurting me. to stay like that. And I think that was the biggest thing for me, was letting that go.
So everyone gets asked this question. This is the, Intentional Health for Women podcast. What does living intentionally look like for you moving forward into the next season of your life?
What does it look like? It's funny you asked that, because I've spent every morning for the past 3 weeks writing out my plan for the year. Every morning I'll sit down, I broke it into categories. So, like in my romantic relationship, in my business, in my friendships, in my family, in my self-growth, I write it out. And I think it's having a plan and acting in alignment. Like everything that you do, you need to ask, is this in alignment with what I want out of life?
Yep.
Because it's very easy to get so caught up in the now or the instant gratification of things that we might act out of alignment with the plan that we have. So for example, if it was our health, for me, like it would be very easy for me to want to start a deficit to lose a little bit of weight as summer approaches, right?
Mm-hmm.
But realistically, my health goals for this year are to be overall very healthy, have good energy, be eating intuitively, have just like maintained for a period of time. So if I were to start a deficit, that does not align with what I have planned. I think it's basically getting clear on what you want.
Yeah.
Is the biggest answer with that.
Love it. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Absolutely. Real quick, where can we find you?
You can find me on Instagram at PSimmonsFit, on TikTok at PSimmonsFit, and on YouTube actually at PSimmonsFit.
Amazing. I appreciate you.
Thank you. I appreciate being on.
Yeah. If this episode brought you value, please subscribe, share with a friend, and leave us a review. We are not normal. We are intentional.